Hi, this is Collins. A while ago, I made a little movie called Hoax Not, in which I contended that at the time of the Apollo missions, we did not yet have the slow-motion video technology to fake the lunar surface telecast. Jarrah White disagrees with me about that, and he made a 25-minute film to dispute what I'm saying. From the note of contempt in his voice, it does sound like Jarrah's mad at me about something.
Yeah, try wrap your head around that logic.
But if you look beyond that, I think he's essentially doing a good thing. Instead of waving a magic wand over the technology question, the way some people do, he's trying to come to grips with the technology. And whether you think he's wrong or right, I think we have to applaud that. Now, if Jarrah is right, then that's good news for me, because then it means this whole awful episode of my life can be over. I could just retract what I said and move on. Meanwhile, my own work experience has been misinterpreted in different ways by people of different persuasions.
Collins claims to have been involved in the film business for 3 decades.
Well, that's dressing it up a little. What Collins really said was, I've been shooting in the studio for about 30 years now. I know what to look for. Lighting-wise, that is. That doesn't mean anybody in Hollywood has my phone number, and it doesn't make me special. There are thousands of DPs and gaffers out there who can take a look at a scene and give you a good guess as to how it was lit. When I was younger, I used to go out as a DP, and even now I have strong opinions about lighting technique, which sometimes gets me in trouble with the DPs I hire in. Today, I write and direct little marketing films, commercials, a few music videos, and mini documentaries. My career is unremarkable, but it happened.
So, you've been in the film business since 1982. That's a good 10 years after the Apollo program ended.
You are correct, sir. I was not yet working in film and video when I was 12. That was about the age when I first picked up an 8mm camera. But to your point, yes, my awareness of film and video technology from before I started working is necessarily incomplete. And that's why Googling stuff wouldn't be enough for me. I actually had to talk to broadcast engineers who were working in the 1960s. The point of contention here is that if you show people moving in slow motion, they will appear to be in low gravity. Not everyone agrees with that, as you know, but we're taking that as the starting conceit and trying to see how a long, continuous telecast could have been pre-recorded in slow motion, on video, not film. I was curious how much overcranking we'd really need if slow motion does simulate low gravity. I read somewhere that the record speed should be 2.46 of the playback speed, because that's the square root of the ratio of the gravitational accelerations of the Earth and the Moon, but as you know, I'm not real good with math.
Seriously?
So, I did a little science experiment here in my apartment, which, for the record, is on Earth. I downloaded this NTSC clip from a NASA archive page, which estimates that David Scott dropped his hammer from a height of 160 centimeters.
How about that?
I made a reference point that same height and dropped my own hammer. I was a little dubious about that height estimate, though, because it made David seem like a giant. So I also dropped my hammer from my own shoulder height, which is about 140 centimeters. Next, I scaled the clips to match in height, and time stretched my own clip to match the duration of the astronaut's hammer drop, 35 frames. For a drop of 160 centimeters, the stretch was 220%. For 140 centimeters, it was 221%. Not much difference at all. This says nothing about whether the NASA clip is real or fake. It just tells us how slow we need to go in order to replicate what they did. For a 30 FPS playback, our video record speed should be about 66 FPS to match speeds with the Apollo 15 video. For Apollo 11, it's easier because the playback speed is lower than NTSC, so you don't really need high-speed video per se. Jarrah's suggestion is that we record the whole event on quad, then transfer it in 30-second buckets to an Ampex HS100 disc recorder, which you can play back in slow-mo. Edit each segment back onto a quad edit master, and
Eventually, you will have the entire EVA converted into slow motion and stored onto videotape.
that's a good theory. Whether you can do it depends on whether you can make like 95 frame accurate edits between the quad machine and the disc recorder in the days before timecode editing. What they did have was a system of Q tones and multiple heads, which I'm told would enable frame accurate edits between those machines. So, theoretically, what you're suggesting could be done. Therefore, if slow motion does give the appearance of low gravity, and if you can perform frame accurate edits between a disc recorder and a quad machine, then I think we have to promote faking Apollo 11 from impossible to not bloody likely. That's progress, right? There is a little confusion about the production version of the Ampex disc recorder.
Upon further reading, I learned that the HS200 lets you handle material of any length, from short commercials to complete programs. Very interesting. Well, if it can hold material of any length, that one HS200 could easily store the entire lunar EVA.
Very interesting indeed. Now forget what the copywriter told you and turn to the back page of the same brochure. The spec sheet tells you that the storage capacity for the HS200 was the same as the HS100. But if you ever do find a disc that can record material of any length, please let me know, because I want one. Now, let's move on to the later missions where we would actually have to overcrank video, because they were shown at 2997.
No high-speed video cameras in 1969? Wow. I wonder how much research Collins did on that.
The funny thing is, last July I read through these same exact 2 pages you're showing me and came away with a different viewpoint.
I pulled up this motionvideoproducts.com page, a website run by professional experts in high-speed photography, and on that page we find this short, sweet and to-the-point statement. Up to the early 1960s, film was the only medium available to record motion that was too fast for observation. In the late 1960s, the development of reliable video technology gave researchers and engineers another tool for motion analysis and the benefit of immediate review of the recorded event.
Great, just show us one. Tell me which system you mean, and I'll believe you. This is a web page for a motion analysis company, which uses high-speed imaging to troubleshoot factory production lines and study athletic performance, things like that. Things that typically involve short bursts of action and don't need full res. Jarrah refers back to this statement several times during his film as proof that we had high-speed video in the 1960s. I think you need to get just a little more specific, because if you look at the 1999 white paper from the same company, Chris Balch tells us that the first generation video motion analyzer became available in the 1970s. He mentions several high-speed systems from the late 70s and 80s, but doesn't list one from the 1960s. Now, I know there was something called the Videologic Instar system from 1970. It could overcrank, but it was black and white. Chris Balch mentions a color high-speed system from NAC that appeared in 1979. A TV engineer tells me there was one from Sony using a wideband 1-inch recorder that could deliver 90 FPS, and that came out in the mid-80s. To fake the surface telecast from Apollo 14 onward, what we need is a color video system that we can overcrank to at least 60 FPS, and not just for short bursts, but for longer durations. And we need it by January 1971. I haven't found that system yet. If you find it, let us know.
Perhaps Collins is thinking of high-speed video cameras with charge-coupled devices, or CCD chips, which didn't come out until 1982.
No, Jarrah. This isn't just about the taking sensor. It's about the processing and recording system you need to do overcrank video.
The CCD chip revolutionized the high-speed video camera's role in the film industry.
Just to be clear, high-speed video cameras didn't play any role in the film industry until well after the advent of digital. But for regular video, you're right, chip cameras changed everything.
Pre-1982 high-speed video cameras used a video tube, like a Videocon tube or a Farnsworth image dissector instead of a CCD chip.
Yes, Vidicons, Orthicons, Plumicons, Saticons, etc. I think for this particular application you'll find that Farnsworth's 1927 invention is a bit of a dead end. But let's talk about the tubes. This guy, Dwight Stephen Boniecki, wrote the book about the video technology used in Apollo, and he learned it from the people who built this stuff. So if you're ever looking for something to debunk on a rainy day, debunk this. In real life, the Apollo 11 camera used what they call a secondary electron conduction tube built by Westinghouse in Elmira. The SEC tube was better in low light than a Vidicon and more rugged and lightweight than an Orthicon. The later Apollo missions also used an SEC tube, but now with a color filter wheel spinning behind the lens, so the black and white sensor could capture red, green, and blue image info one after the other. Back on Earth, the sequential RGB color fields had to be buffered using multiple heads on a disc recorder and then put back together to form a color NTSC signal. That's why you see color blurring on fast-moving objects in Apollo videos, because the different color fields were registering at slightly different times. Now, you gotta wonder, why would they go to all that trouble? Why not just use a regular color camera? Because a traditional 3-tube camera would have been too heavy, too fragile, and too power-hungry for the mission constraints. Well, the mission people knew that, but I don't think anybody else did. I mean, you don't need a color filter to fool the public. So why would they go build such a cockamamie color system if they didn't really need to bring it to the moon? I can't figure that out. Maybe you can. Jarrah also disputes my point about electronic performance. I say the argument that NASA's computers were slow is inconsistent with the argument that their video cameras were fast.
The computer that NASA used on the Apollo spacecraft has nothing to do with the computing power of high-speed video cameras of the day.
Why? Because you say so? Computers and cameras both rely on electronic components that have a certain performance profile. Manufacturers either have high-performance electronics or they don't. It can't be both ways. That's my point. Jarrah also spends time fleshing out the film shoot theory, even though he doesn't really think the lunar telecasts were shot on film.
Why not shoot it on 16mm film instead?
Because your gate weave and dust and emulsion flakes are going to be more magnified on 16. And if you think you won't have any of those things in a roll of film almost an hour long, then you're living in a world where miracles happen. And let me give you one other tip. If you're thinking of shooting 16mm at double speed with a 2,300-foot load, don't. Don't do it, Jarrah.
Collins claims he is trying to make faking the lunar telecasts easy, yet the film format he recommends using is one used for cinema, not television. Anyone who has spent 30 years in a studio should know that.
Dude, this part is just incorrect. You're saying that anybody who works in the business long enough should know something that just isn't true. Jarrah, network commercials, series, and TV movies were almost always shot on 35 until very recently. The trouble is, some of your viewers know this, even if you don't. And when you say stuff like that, you're kind of dismantling your own credibility with anybody who's ever worked in production. Those people will never believe you now. But getting back to film artifacts, Jarrah says,
why would NASA worry about people finding these artifacts in the footage when what the world saw was a copy of a copy? This obviously allowed many more grainy artifacts to get in, along with a major reduction of the resolution, contrast, and brightness. And Collins is worried about people discovering film artifacts in these television transmissions? Please.
Yes, please, because while some people saw it like this, and some people saw it like this, some engineer somewhere saw it looking more like this. And if this image had even a little gate weave, dust, or scratches, they would have had to ask themselves why this supposedly live telecast looks like film. It does not look like film, which may be why you yourself don't think it was shot on film. At least I hope so. The thing that enables this controversy is that none of us was there on the moon to see if people really came and went. Just like none of us was there at the crypt to see if Jesus really rose from the dead. Just like we weren't in the room to see if an angel really spoke to Muhammad. There are things that we cannot directly know. So we make our best guess based on what we can see. That's what you're doing, that's what I'm doing. If you and I look at the same experience and think it means two different things, that should be okay. There's no practical reason to turn it into a holy war. I'm usually wrong at least once or twice a day. If I'm wrong about this too, that's great. I would encourage Apollo hoax proponents to develop a single technically solid hypothesis for how the missions could be faked. Get it verified by some broadcast engineers of the era while they're still alive. then you're one step closer to being able to prove it. I made my movie because people seem to misunderstand film and video. It's not my life's work to try to prove that people went to the moon. I don't know, and to be honest, I don't care if they did or didn't. I don't have a dog in this Sputnik. Moon Hoax Not was one clip out of like 118 clips that I put on YouTube in the last 6 years. But because it somehow stepped on a hot wire topic, it got a truly ridiculous amount of views. So when Jarrah says,
I find it pathetic seeing so many members of the pro-NASA side praise and fall blindly behind it as though it were a beacon from God.
I have to agree with him. Despite that blitz of attention and the love and the hate and the links on websites I never heard of and getting mistaken for a professional skeptic and invited to a radio interview and contacted by an LA producer and tweeted by Stephen Fry and having a guy from Google come over from London urging me to monetize my channel, despite all that, I can't be Moon Hoax Guy. That's not what I do for a living. This is what I do. And if you'll excuse me, I have to get back to it.